Okay, the Rules Committee will come to order. Today, we are meeting on a contempt report recommended last week by the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol. The report says that former Trump administration officials Peter Navarro and Daniel Scavino are in contempt of Congress for their failure to comply with duly issued subpoenas, and it refers the matter to the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia. This action is necessary because both Mr. Navarro and Mr. Scavino have information which is materially relevant to the Select Committee's investigation. Yet both have failed to produce documents and appear for depositions despite repeated attempts by the Select Committee to compel them to do so. And before some of my Republican colleagues start talking about executive privilege, let me remind them that the Biden administration has not invoked executive privilege, and Donald Trump himself has not engaged with the Select Committee to invoke executive privilege here. In fact, when he did try to block the release of other documents to the Select Committee, a federal court concluded that his claims of executive privilege would have failed even if he were still president. And then the Supreme Court refused to hear his appeal, citing that decision. In fact, just last week, another federal judge ruled that one of Donald Trump's lawyers, John Eastman, had to turn over documents to the Select Committee and concluded that the former president, more likely than not, committed crimes in attempting to obstruct the counting of electoral votes. And former Trump administration official Steve Bannon has been indicted and is now facing trial for his failure to comply with the committee's subpoenas. Yet, rather than follow the law, Mr. Navarro and Mr. Scavino have chosen to obstruct the work of Congress and try to prevent us from getting to the truth about how the January 6th attack was planned. Notwithstanding their attempts to hide from the American people, the facts uncovered by the Select Committee are alarming. The committee has revealed that the chaos and violence of January 6th was not spontaneous. It was not a normal tourist visit or a rally that got out of hand. It was a sophisticated, coordinated attack, planned and executed at the highest levels of government and designed to nullify the outcome of a free and fair election. There were PowerPoints created about how to stop the certification of the votes. Memos circulated deep within the West Wing about declaring a national emergency and using the military to seize ballots. Campaigns to pressure people like former Vice President Mike Pence to just throw away electoral votes from the states President Biden won. And this was not some fly-by-night operation. It was a months-long scheme to lie to the American people, culminating in a violent attack to prevent Congress from certifying the will of the voters. An operation that, by their own admission, directly involved both Mr. Navarro and Mr. Scavino. In December of 2020, Mr. Navarro released a report repeating disproven conspiracy theories about the 2020 election. The Select Committee has uncovered that his report was circulated within the West Wing by officials who were pushing the lie that President Trump had won, even though he had lost. Navarro's report was even included in the tweet where President Trump announced his January 6th Stop the Steal rally. And Mr. Navarro reportedly worked with members of the Trump campaign's legal team to directly encourage state legislators to overturn the results of the 2020 election. Just 4 days before the attack on the Capitol, Mr. Navarro joined a call with Donald Trump, encouraging the lawmakers to overturn the will of the voters and appoint President Trump, even though he lost the Electoral College in 2020 by the same margin he won in 2016. Of course, losing the popular vote both times by a fairly large margin. For his part, Mr. Scavino spoke with former President Trump multiple times by phone during the attack, and he was present with him during the period when Americans inside the Capitol building and across the nation were urgently calling on him for help to halt the violence while he watched it all on TV. Refusing to take action as members of Congress, Fox News hosts, even members of his own family begged him to intervene. It's a 7.5-hour long period that we learned last week is mysteriously missing from White House call logs. 7.5 hours. I mean, only 18 and a half minutes of Nixon's call logs were missing during the Watergate. And here we have 7.5 hours unaccounted for. Mr. Scavino's recollection of those hours is extremely important in determining whether President Trump sought, through his own action or inaction, to corruptly obstruct or impede our work in Congress as we met to count electoral votes. The Select Committee also has reason to believe that Mr. Scavino had advance warning of the possibility of violence on January 6th because Mr. Scavino had a history of monitoring websites where users openly discuss acts of violence in the days leading up to the attack. Mr. Scavino and Mr. Navarro have both bragged publicly about their efforts to overturn the election, yet neither had the courage to appear before the Select Committee. Well, I believe there must be accountability for what happened, or it will happen again. Nobody is above the law. Contempt of Congress is a serious federal crime punishable by up to a year in prison and fines up to $100,000. This is not a step that we take lightly, but it is sadly a step that Mr. Navarro and Mr. Scavino have forced us to take in pursuit of the truth about the dastardly attack on American democracy that took place on January 6, 2021. And with that, let me turn to our